Erev Tov, everyone. What an honor it is for me to be here along with you. I hope you can see the source sheet. Do not worry, we're not going to study all of the source sheet, just 80% of it. Okay, so as a starting point for the discussion, I'd like to read some of the most amazing words of the Gemara that appear in source number 3. How amazing is it to celebrate this Siyum on the same week, mamash b'shavua shechal bo rega lifnei the celebration of Leil Seder. And here come the most perplexing words of Rav Yehuda, which triggered the minds of so many commentators in source number 3 in the Gemara in Masechet Pesachim Daf Vav Amud Bet, in which the Gemara highlights the two basic elements that we today use in order to abolish the Chametz, to do Bi'ur Chametz. We know that Bi'ur Chametz starts with our hearts, right? It starts with a decision. We have to decide to do Bitul, to abolish the Chametz in our minds, in our hearts. But along with that, we also need to do a bdika. We need to check and look and physically make sure that our house is clean of Chametz. And the major question that is highlighted in this Gemara in source number 3 is, what is the connection between those two elements, between those two actions? The abolishment of the chametz in our minds, and obviously the physical abolishment of the chametz, doing the bdika. And says Rav Yehuda Amarav, habodek tzarich sheyivatel. If you do a bdika, if you physically look for the chametz, it's not enough. You still need to do bitul chametz in your heart. You have to make an aware decision to abolish the chametz. Why? What's the reason behind that? So there are many excuses given to this Gemara, but I want to focus on the explanation that is given by Rava. Continues the Gemara and says, Amarava, Zera Shema Yimtza Gluska Yafa V'Data Elohe. Says the Gemara, there is a hypothetical possibility that even if you check and clean your house, at the end of the day, sometime during Pesach maybe, you may find a roll or some other piece of chametz, could be a piece of cake, and you would like to eat it. But because you haven't abolished the chametz, then you have a problem. Says the Gemara, well, so what's the problem? Even if you haven't abolished the chametz beforehand, now that you have seen this, you can now abolish the chametz. And answers the Gemara, in other words, answers the Gemara, the problem is that if you do not do the bitul on time before isur chametz, then eventually you may reach a situation in which halachically the chametz is not considered your possession. You cannot do bitul chametz for the chametz anymore, but it is still existent in your house, and you may even have the passion and the will to eat it. So that is why, according to this shita, Rav Yehuda says it's not enough to do bdikat chametz, you have to abolish the chametz. But then one of the most famous questions on Rav Yehuda is the question of the Tosfot. And the question on the Tosfot appears in source number 5, and let's read it very quickly. Ask the Tosfot, וקשה לרב יהודה, כיוון דצריך ביטול, שנאמר, הבודק צריך שיבטל מדאורייתא בביטול בעלמא. Sorry, I hope you can see this. I'm trying to make this a bit smaller. ומדאורייתא בביטול בעלמא סגי, אמה יצריכו חכמים בדיקה כלל? If, according to the shita of Rav Yehuda, no matter what, bdika is not enough, and you need a bitul chametz, why is there a need for a bdika? Let's just do bitul chametz, and that would be enough. Let's just abolish the chametz in our hearts. We don't need to physically look for chametz. We'll just make an aware decision that we do not have chametz in our homes, and that would be enough. And the answer of the Tosfot is phenomenal, and that would be a starting point for our discussion. Answer the Tosfot, V'nireh l'Rav Yehuda, I'm reading the second line in source number 5. דאף על גב דסגי בביטול בעלמא, החמירו חכמים לבדוק חמץ ולבערו, שלא יבוא לאוכלו. Say the Tosfot, the power of our mind is so great that we have the ability to transform and to change only by mere usage of our brains, of our thoughts. We can transform a piece of chametz into something that is not chametz. But because the power of our mind is so strong, so powerful, we could do the reverse action as well. Meaning, if I'm so passionate and I so want to eat this piece of cake, I could just as well transform it and make it into a chametz again. Therefore, the bdika, we need to physically look for chametz and abolish the chametz physically and not just trust the power of our minds, because our minds are so powerful. We can make chametz into non-chametz, and we can make something that is not chametz into chametz again. It is all the power of our minds. And that is a starting point for our discussion. And just to highlight how powerful that power of our minds during the mitzvah of Bitul Chametz, let's read the words of the Rambam that appear in source number 8. Now, the Rambam teaches us basic terminology in Hebrew. There are two sets of brachot and mitzvot on mitzvot aseh, on physical actions that we perform. When I want to light candles on Shabbat, right? I recite the bracha before I light the candles, nachon? So how do I say? I say, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu, what? Lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Or on Chanukah, lehadlik ner shel Chanukah, right? I recite the bracha and then I perform the action. So I say the bracha, lehadlik. But as we know, some of the mitzvot, we recite the bracha only after we perform the mitzvah. For example, lulav, right? We do the netilat lulav, and only then do we say the bracha, and therefore we say al netilat lulav, right? If I were to say the bracha before performing the action, I would have said litol lulav. Nachon asher kitshanu mitzvotav tzivanu litol lulav. But we say al netilat lulav because we have recited it. We are reciting over an action that we have already performed. I'll give you another example. Immersing in mikvah, right? When you do the tefillah in the mikvah, right? You've performed the action before you recite the bracha. Had we performed the action after reciting the bracha, we would have said, Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu litbol, nachon? But we don't say that. We say, Baruch Ata Hashem asher tzivanu al hatvilah, al netilat lulav. Right? As opposed to lehadlik, as opposed to litol, as opposed to litbol. Now let's go back to biur chametz. When we are to say the bracha before starting the bdika on Erev Pesach, what do we say? Baruch Ata Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu al biur chametz. Now, as we all know, we say the bracha before we perform the action. It's before we start looking and seeking for the chametz. So, linguistically, there seems to be something wrong here. We should have said, livdok leva'er chametz, asher kitshanu mitzvotav v'tzivanu leva'er chametz. But we say al bi'ur chametz, as if we have already performed the action. And the answer of the Rambam appears in source number 8. I'm reading 2 lines from the end of the source. Says the Rambam, וכך הוא מבאר על ביעור חמץ. Why? שמשעה שגמר בליבו לבטל, נעשית מצוות ביעור קודם שיבדוק. So powerful is the power of our thought that once I have now made the decision that I'm going to do the bdika of chametz, after cleaning my house and trying to abolish chametz in every possible way, to a matter of fact, I am actually reciting a bracha over something that has already been done. Doing the bdika is just a makeba patish, but I've already performed the action. This action had been performed with our minds. By the way, this is fascinating. It is an exception to the rule because we know that halachically, we do not perform actions only in our minds, according to Jewish halacha. For example, lo tisna et achicha bilvavcha. According to halacha, it's not enough to hate someone in order to be in violation of this commandment, lo tisna. It has to have physical, practical ramifications. Ve'ahavta l'racha kamocha, same applies. It has to be practical. Only here do we see a very clear example of an action that is performed only with the power of thought. Why is that? Why is it that the Gemara goes out of its way to enhance the power of thought, bitul belev, and how you can transform piece of chametz, from chametz to something that is not chametz, and back again to becoming chametz, bitul belev, to the extent that even when I'm thinking about abolishing the chametz, already I'm doing bitul. What is the meaning of that? I'd like to share the words of my grandmother, source number 11, who was a very big scholarly woman. And my grandmother was a psychologist, and her shita in teaching the Torah was that she would always analyze the psukim of the Torah as a psychologist. And my grandmother is presenting a very famous question. She's questioning the words of Moshe Rabbeinu. The words of Moshe Rabbeinu that appear in source number 13, Hashem says to Moshe Rabbeinu, I'm reading Pasuk Yud, Ve'ata lecha ve'eshlachecha el Paro ve'hotze et ami bnei Yisrael mimitzrayim. Hashem is saying to Moshe Rabbeinu at Ma'amad Asneh, now you go after I have nominated you as the Shaliach, you're going to redeem Am Yisrael. I'm sending you to who? Who am I sending you to? I'm sending you to Paro, to redeem my people from Egypt. The mission is very simple. It's very straightforward. Hashem is sending Moshe to Paro. Look at Moshe's answer. Vayomer Moshe el Elokim, Hina anochi ba el bnei Yisrael, ואמרתי להם, אלוקי אבותיכם שלחני אליכם, ואמרו לי, מה שמו, מה אומר להם? Says Moshe, I don't know what to do. If I'm going to go to Bnei Israel and I'm going to say to them, Hashem, the God of your forefathers said, send me to you, and they will ask me, what is your name? What will be my answer? But this is a very, very surprising question on behalf of Moshe Rabbeinu. Because as we have seen very clearly before, Hashem never sent Moshe Rabbeinu to Bnei Israel. Hashem sent Moshe Rabbeinu to Paro. So why is Moshe bringing up Bnei Israel? So that's the question. It's a very famous question. Let's read the words of my grandmother and her analysis and her answer. Source number 11, I'm reading. הדברים תמוהים מאוד. מי ביקש ממשה ללכת אל בני ישראל? Who asked Moshe to go to בני ישראל? הרי הקדוש ברוך הוא אמר למשה רק לך ישלחך אל פרעה. Hashem sent him to Paro and not to the people. אבל לא ציווהו ללכת אל בני ישראל. Doesn't need to ask the permission of Bnei Israel to redeem them out of Egypt. He needs to ask the permission of Paro. I'm skipping to the third line in source number 11. נראה מכאן יסוד גדול בחינוך. This is a major, powerful message in education. והוא, לעולם אין אפשרות לשכנע אחרים בדבר, אם המשכנע עצמו או שלוחיו אינם משוכנעים בעצמם בצדקתו. You will never be able to convince anyone of something that you're not convinced about. We will never be able to convince Paro to redeem Am Yisrael out of Egypt if Bnei Israel are not convinced that they want to be redeemed out of Egypt. And in her words, אם בני ישראל אינם משוכנעים שהם עומדים להיגאל מהשעבוד הנורא, איך ישתכנע פרעה? Paro will not be convinced. It has to come from them. On this night, when we abolish the chametz, we have to be convinced that there is no chametz in our lives. It has to come from us. By the way, this is the pshat of the Ketuv. Going back to the pshat of the Ketuv describing the abolishment of chametz, I'm skipping to Perek Yud Gimel, Pasuk Zayin. It's the final line in source number 2. As you see, it's very clear. The Torah goes out of its way to explain to us in Pshat of the Ketuv, and by the fact, according to our sages, this is the source to the concept of Bitul Balev, the fact that we abolish chametz in our hearts. Lo yira'eh, source number 2, I'm reading the final line, Lo yira'eh lecha chametz. You cannot have chametz. Velo yira'eh lecha seor. This repetition, lecha, lecha, it has to come from you. It's not about the physical abolishment of chametz. It's about the aware decision not to have chametz in our lives. Very briefly, I shall end with the words of Rav Soloveitchik that appear in source number 12. And let's just read this very, very quickly. I'm reading source number 12, second line, the end of the second line. Says Rav Soloveitchik, Ha'adam ha'boger, the mature person, hu ma'asi yeter al hamidah, we're too practical, רציונלי מכדי שיפתח בתחושותיו ובשאיפותיו האינטואיטיביות. We are too rational to trust our instincts, our intuitive feelings. עם פרסונלי, מכדי שיוכל לחוש בחוויה החיה של האחווה עם האלוקים. And I will even say, we have become too cynical to lose that sense of intimacy with Hashem. הוא גאה יתר על המידה. We're too proud. וגאוותו מורכבת מעובדת מעורבותו בתהליך של צמיחה, עלייה והתקדמות. It is our lives who make us too proud. It is our lives that make us, form us into something that is like Chametz, which seems to be complete, mushlam, that has risen. Says Rav Soloveitchik, from this we derive the message of Bitul Balev. It has to come from us. We have to make an aware decision that we are mevatlim chametz in order not to have chametz in our lives. He says we should feel like a child again, to choose to lead intuitive lives closer to Hashem and to leave that cynicism aside on this night of Erev Pesach. And with this message of Bitul Balev and the power of our thoughts, I leave us. I wish us all a Chag Sameach v'Kasher, besorot tovot beramat haklal v'aprat.